All right, well, welcome everyone to the Ideate Software online user group that is focused at really the UK and Europe and Middle East and Africa. So, we're going to be doing these online sort of virtual user groups probably about once a quarter. And so the next one, we've got a slide coming up in just a little bit. We're going to be in May. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. So some introductions here, like I said, just some housekeeping items. We'll talk about in just a second about being able to answer or to ask questions and also being able to unmute yourself. But we have some great presenters. Our own Ideate Software, Jan Sako, is going to be talking about the benefits of Ideate Installer. And he is our Ideate Software support and QA manager. And then we have Paul Duggleby from HOK. He's the design technology manager. He's going to be sharing some project auditing tips. And then we have Neil Rooney, who's the senior medical facility design specialist at Electa. And he's going to be sharing some language translation workflows. I think it's really interesting, especially since we're going to be really delivering our solutions in more languages as we go forward for this quarter. And then, of course, along the way, we're going to be stopping and we're going to be asking you some questions with some poll questions. We'll also be having time to answer any questions and have some dialogue and an open discussion. So that is our agenda for today. So, as I said, we're calling it housekeeping or sort of, review items is that, again, there is that question panel. Glynis is going to be reviewing that. So at any time, please, don't be shy. Feel free to type questions as we go along. If you have questions for our presenters too, that's great. And we can, certainly open up the floor and talk about any particular questions that you have. Also, I know it's always a little bit, sometimes people feel uncomfortable, but you can unmute yourself and you can ask a question too. I think we'll probably wait until they're after each of the presentations. We'll ask if there are any particular questions. Oh, and by the way, this session is being recorded, and it will be available on our website, or sections of it will be available in a few days. So again, today's presenters, we have Jan Sako from Ideate Software, Paul Duggleby from HOK, and Neil Rooney from Electa. And so we're just so excited and happy that everyone's been able to volunteer their time today. So first, though, we would like to ask you, where are you calling in from? We know everyone's probably in their home office, but we're very interested to know where you are. And so I think Glynis is going to open that poll.
Yep,
looks like preliminary. It looks like a lot of people are from the United Kingdom. Quite a few people from Europe. Actually, I'm surprised. No one from America, even though it's a little bit early here, but it's not crazy early.
I think, yeah. I wish we need to rewrite this poll, Richard, as where do you wish you were today?
Yeah, that would be totally different, right?
All right, looks like I'm going to go ahead and close that. And there we are, the results. Yep, everybody's, I didn't answer. I am calling it from America, and you are as well. But
yeah, well, the presenters don't answer, so.
All right, there you go.
Well, great. Thank you very much. And so I would like to introduce Jan Sako, who is our Ideate Software support and QA manager. And he is actually located physically all the time outside of the London area. So he's in the UK. So I'm going to take the presenter rights and pass it over to Jan here.
That's cool. So my name is Jan. I am part of the Ideate team here in the UK. And I would like to talk a little bit about what we did to help you and your teams to deploy and increase the usage of Ideate software throughout your organizations. One of the things we were hearing is that in the past we provided Ideate software as individual downloads for each product and each version, and now that we have a whole portfolio of different solutions, it was a bit harder to manage and to keep everyone up to date. So we have come with a couple of ways to do this, and I would like to talk about one of them a little more. Richard, would you mind moving on to the next slide?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep,
We don't have a slide.
Yeah,
That's
just
okay.
the one slide. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Just go ahead and give me the screen.
Okay.
And I can handle it.
Will do.
So there's two different ways how you could get our software packages right now, and they're both available from our website. So the bundled installs are where you get all of our solutions in one download, in the same download. So there's two different ones. The first one is your usual UI Exe bundle, where you can choose or not to install all the software in one go. Now, this is great for someone who's trying out the software, someone who is installing it themselves, but once you have 20 or 50 users, it's not that great having to download and run them each individually. There's also the question of licensing. So we have come up with another way to do this, and it's called Ideate Software Installer. It's basically a bundled package of MSI with a little exe to manage them. And what it can do is install any version and all versions that you so choose, and it can set up the licensing as well in the same go. And the way it's done is basically through this little txt file where you would either enter your license code or you would enter the add server name to it, and that's all. And the installer exe is able to grab that information and configure the licensing correctly on every workstation that you're deploying this to. And what's important is the end users will have no need to do anything. They launch the software and it will just run, it will work. So this is great for people that are transitioning to cloud network license, for example, excuse me, or changing license servers. Every once in a while, IT decides that the server needs to be retired. And again, because of Revit is moving off of local FlexLM network to cloud, oftentimes customers choose not to continue with FlexLM licensing for Ideate either. And so you're doing some changes, and this is a great tool to apply those changes throughout your organization. So it does a few more things. There's some controls what you can do. Again, change versions or install certain versions, install certain products or not, depending on what you have and what you want each users to have. And it is an exe, but it certainly works with PDQ deploy and whatever other network admin tool you want to use. You can even include this to regular Revit deployment, and I'm happy to work with anyone that would want to do that. Afterward, just feel free to reach out to support at Ideate Software, and that comes to me, or anyone at Ideate is able to direct you with the deployment question to the right place. So that was it. Quick 5 minutes. Thank you, Richard. Go ahead and take it back.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, just if you didn't mention it, you can always send an email to support@ideatesoftware.com, and our dedicated staff will get right on that. All right, let me go back here to the presenter. Excellent, and thanks, Jan. I appreciate that. Okay. So we have another poll, and Paul is going to be talking about some of the auditing techniques and sort of software that he's using from Ideate Software to be able to perform some of these audits. So we thought it'd be a really good question to sort of preface his presentation by asking, do you audit? So Glynis, yeah, so you've got already got it up. That's excellent.
Up and running, yeah.
I've got the screen on the second screen, so I had to look over to the right. I love it so far. No one has said never.
All right, we're getting close to being full here. Just one more second. We're waiting for everybody to participate. This is just to make sure you're awake. So don't be afraid to say, should we be doing auditing? But it is nice that everybody seems to have some plan. Yeah.
They're all awake. It's us that's early morning.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this out here, and we'll post the results back in a second. And we have the majority of people saying at random, which is, I think, a good, honest answer, 63%, and 25% are weekly, which I think is probably where I was or would be if I were working in a regular practice. And then a number of people, 13% saying daily, which is impressive as well. So I'll go ahead and hide that, and you can continue on.
Excellent. Thanks, Glynis. Well, like I said, we're thrilled to have our presenters today. And first out of the gate is Paul Duggleby from HOK. He's the Design Technology Manager. So I'd like to pass it over to you, Paul, and you can talk through these slides, and you let me know when you'd like to take over presentation control.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Hi, everybody. As it says there, as Richard introduced me, I'm Paul Duggleby from HOK, Design Technology Manager in our London studio. And I think I had to check this before today's session. We've actually been using the Ideate tools for just over 10 years. We started off with Ideate Explorer and BIMlink. And then I think in the last couple of years, we've actually signed up for the whole suite. So we've got Ideate Apps, Style Manager, and Sticky to complement the original two that we had. We do have a lot of different Revit add-ins in HOK, as I'm sure others do as well. But I think Ideate Explorer is probably my go-to tool. I think if I don't use it daily, I'd be surprised. It's one of the tools I use when I'm auditing models, and I also use it fairly regularly when I'm helping users when they actually have issues in their models, and I help troubleshoot the problems using that tool. You can jump to the next slide, please, Richard. So I typically carry out audits as they're approaching milestones or deadlines to make sure there's nothing obvious that might cause a problem with issuing the documents on the deadline day, and also audit models when users report that there are performance issues with their project. And maybe I audit every now and again when I'm being nosy. But typically my audits look for anything that could cause performance issues or maybe not following the HOK or project-specific standards. And for a lot of the categories, it's just a case of recording the number of elements that exist within the project. And then if there's a follow-up audit for the next stage, we can just compare the actual numbers of items and see how the project's changed. And there's other things as well that we look at. So on the right-hand side, there's 10 items that I typically look at, and I can use Ideate Explorer to certainly capture the numbers of those elements. But also I can check for if it's linked models or linked CAD files, make sure they're on the right work sets, and make sure there's no duplicates. For levels, make sure that elements are assigned to the right levels. And again, for views and sheets, just making sure that we don't have too many unplaced views. The naming is correct and following the standards where those views are placed on sheets, and then any temporary views that can be deleted can be highlighted in the audit. For work sets, again, it's just making sure that we are using the right work sets for the elements, and it's very easy to see that with Ideate Explorer. And then warnings, again, the tool within Ideate Explorer is much easier to navigate than the built-in warning dialog box within the Revit environment. So with that, I'm going to jump over to Revit. If Richard, you can make me presenter.
Absolutely. I'm trying to make myself presenter. That's not going to work. There we go.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my Revit screen now.
Yes, we can. Excellent.
So rather than just talk about it, I just thought I'd show you some of the things I do with Explorer. And I say it's one of the tools I use for when I carry out my audits, but it's a very easy way to get the numbers, which is what I said is kind of what we start looking for, because if there's too many elements of a certain object, you can see that might cause a problem. So I'll start at the top and I'll look at Cad Links. I'll see how many links there are. Sometimes you get imported files which can cause a problem. But I can see here how many instances are. There's two view specific ones here. If I select these, you can see in the properties dialog pretty quickly where things are, whether they're on the right work set, etc., which in this case it is. Rooms is an interesting one because we can actually see whether we've got unplaced rooms, and if we're feeling brave, we can actually select all of those and just hit delete and remove those to tidy up the model. But again, it's just a case of reporting the numbers. With levels, again, we can see how many levels there are in the project, how they're named. I'm surprised there's that many. But then we can also see whether they're actually on the right work set. In this instance, you can see that actually the work set is empty, which means it's on multiple work sets. So quickly we can just change those levels to be on the right work set. In place families is another one of my bugbears, and that's not obvious. I was a count of those from the first look. But actually, there's a neat little tip here. If you select all the entities within the model, you can use the query option, and then in the search, just put in place, and it filters out to is in place. You can select that item, and then it tells me that I've got 51 in place families within the project, and by clicking on select, it now tells me that I've got a number of columns, masses and walls that are actually in place families. So it's very easy to see where we could make improvements to the model and fix those elements and swap those out with loadable families if we need to. So we can also use the sort by option here to look at the levels again. So this lets me know how many elements there are on each particular level. Third floor, for instance, I could expand that, and there's only the level that exists there. So I could just decide actually that we don't need the third floor and can delete that from here. On the work sets option, again, we can see how many elements there are on each work set, and this is sometimes an easy way to just see whether things are on the right work sets. Okay, we don't typically have a work set for ceiling, so that's a mistake. So we can just select the ceiling element in there and move that to the right work set, like so. And then we can just jump back to, a category. And then we look at the views and the sheets. And so here we can see that I've got a total of 56 views, and this is actually I'll be honest, it's not a proper project. It is our office layout. It's the project we use for making sure people have got desks and seats when we are actually in the office. So we can see we've only got four views on sheets and 52 of the views that aren't on sheets. So again, it's just a case of recording those numbers and maybe highlighting to the team that they could maybe remove some of those views. Sheets, again, we've got five sheets here. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on the warnings. So I've actually customized the priority settings here to bring them in line with what we tend to look at in HOK. So very quickly, again, we can see where these elements might be. And it highlights where we've got problems within the model. And this is the one I like the most, where we have identical instances in the same place. We can be very confident that we can actually delete second item from all of these lists, because that's where we've got a piece of furniture that's exactly the same in exactly the same spot, which obviously can affect counting and scheduling if we leave those there.
Hey, Paul, this is Glynis.
Hi.
Hey, I wanted to just add a little tiny tip about what you just showed. If you could expand the identical instances examples that you have left still. Yeah, when you pick a group of those two things, if you, one thing that you should be all aware of is we are listing them in chronological order. So if you picked the first one that says store one, you'll notice the element ID ends in 899 right there. And then pick the second one, it's a later number. So we're helping you understand in a very subtle way which one was created first. And you can also see, I mean, in this case, Paul happens to own everything, but you can also see, you know, who updated it last and who created it. That, and, you know, sometimes that's relevant when you're trying to make a decision about, you know, which one should be retained.
Yeah, obviously I've just created the warnings just for this
Right.
demonstration. But as you can imagine, I'm sure it's that on actual projects we do see this quite a lot. It's quite interesting to see how many times people place an object before they realise the work set's turned off or that category's turned off in the view and they can't see it, so they keep placing another one.
Yeah, we've actually had customers call us and say, you know, someone just did a copy paste aligned in the entire project. You know, now there's 5,000 duplicates of things. For that reason also, if you right click on that particular warning, yeah, if you right click just right there, you'll notice there's actually extra menu items, which you know, I wouldn't recommend by and large unless you've just done a copy paste align. But this will actually let you retain the originals, means retain the earliest ID and get rid of everything else. So if you've ever had that problem, you can do that.
Yeah, and this is Richard. I just wanted to also interject that, you know, we like to say that the counts of elements are kind of like a blood pressure check. So if Paul goes back to the Explore tab, you know, all the counts, you can quickly see that, you know, let's say you had, in this case, it's so small I can't see the number of ceilings, 8, is that right? Like all of a sudden it's now 800. You can see quickly that, okay, something's wrong because it went from 8 to 800. So I think that's a nice little tip, which we say is kind of like testing the blood pressure of your project.
Okay, so I'm just going to swap projects because I mentioned also that I use the tool to fix problems that occur in projects on the. And so this is something that crops up occasionally. This is the same project, but it's an interiors project. So we started with an AutoCAD background, and I've seen this a couple of times recently on projects actually, where someone will come to me and our CAD background's gone missing. Can you help us find it? So again, you know, I can use Explorer, and actually this is the DWG that's missing. If I double click on it, or first thing is I can see that it's still in the model, which is a good sign. If I double click on it, I remember what I was going to do. Go back to my notes. Right. If I close the view that we're actually looking at, and then just revert back to Explorer, I double click on this, it will then open up a view where it will show the file. And as you can see here, it's not only just moved, but it's also scaled up quite a bit compared to the rest of the geometry in the model. I'm not entirely sure what causes this problem, but I suspect it's something to do with the settings that we use when the original file was linked in. But again, with the file selected, I can look in the properties dialog box, click on edit type up here, and I can see here that actually the units have changed from millimeters to inches, and the scale factor is actually 12. So if I just change this back to where it should be, and also the work set's not right there either. So let's just fix that while we're here. And let's jump back. If I go back to where my original view, I need to deselect. My background is now in the correct place. Okay, if we can jump back to the slides now, Richard. I'll just finish off with a couple more anecdotes. So if we go to the last slide, please. So there's a couple of things that I quite often use the tool for. So missing Cad links, as we've just seen, is one of them. It's probably quite a common one, especially on existing buildings, interior fit outs where we are using CAD files as backgrounds. A couple of other things there. So on a couple of projects, I've been asked about moving elements from one level to another. Sometimes this might be because of a design change and another level's been added to the project, and we need to move some elements that exist on one level up to the next level. And using Ideate Explorer is very easy to select those elements that are actually on that level and move them if Revit lets us. Some categories are easy to move than others, but at least using the tool we can see how many elements there are actually assigned to those levels. The one that I've got there, the last item is actually, I was reminded of a project a couple of years ago now, or several years ago now, when I was putting this presentation together. We had a project where all of a sudden the model got very slow to open. So I opened up the model with all the work sets detached so that it would open up as quickly as it could. And then using Explorer, I was able to identify that for some reason some of the link models, or one of the link models, had been duplicated several times. As I said, it was several years ago now, so I can't actually remember exactly how many times it had been duplicated, but it turned out that one of the users was copying ceilings from one floor up to the others. It was a multi-story building, and the ceilings were the same on each level. It actually picked up the linked file at the same time, so there was multiple instances of this linked model within the project, causing issues with opening and performance. So having identified that was the problem, it was very easy again with all the work sets closed to still select the rogue links and keeping the original one. I just delete the ones that were causing the problem and synchronize with central, and everybody was able to get on with the work as usual. I can't think even now how I would have done that quite as easily without Ideate Explorer. So that was all I wanted to share with you today. I hope it was useful. Thank you.
Paul, thank you so much. That's excellent. In fact, this is a perfect time. I see the question panel as being empty unless I'm missing something, Glynis. Maybe you've answered a couple questions, but if people do have questions for us so far, Ideate Software or for Paul from HOK, please type the questions into the question panel, or you can unmute yourself too.
I don't see any questions, but thank you so much, Paul. That was great. And I should mention that, as Paul mentioned earlier, HOK has been using Ideate Explorer for a very long time, and I also should thank Paul and others at HOK, because I know that they've contributed their good ideas to helping us improve the project. I know for certain that there are many features in Ideate Explorer that Paul and other people at HOK have suggested to us. And we would love anybody's suggestion during this presentation or after this presentation also about making improvements. I think your idea, for example, of the in-place families, and wanting to look for them, yes, you can do that in query, but we've been thinking it is important enough that maybe we ought to actually even move that to the main panel in Explorer. So that's the kind of idea that we're we love to hear. What are you doing frequently? How can we make this more user-friendly? So thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
And piggybacking on what Paul was talking about, I just wanted to show on our video library, which is our page, you go to our Ideate Software website for Ideate Explorer, and we have a playlist for warnings. So if you want to know about, because I think the warnings just are so important, critical to understand and fix on a regular basis as part of your auditing process. So you'll see that there's actually, there was a presentation that I had done, it was a 30-minute webinar, which I've actually done also at the Building Infrastructure Lifecycle Technology seminars that have been pre-pandemic around the globe here. Well, I did a presentation on just specific types of warnings and how critical it was to review those. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a little tip that you can go to this page and you can look at short videos that are just specifically about warnings with Ideate Explorer. Okay, we have another poll to get you excited here. And so what we're going to be doing is, Neil's going to be talking about how he used Ideate BIMlink in sort of I'd say a non-conventional way, basically extracting some of the text from the project and translating that. So we'd like to know, have you used Ideate BIMlink in sort of unconventional categories such as text? And you see the examples there, maybe you've exported out text or dimensions or project info, object styles as an example, maybe view template properties. That is something that we added to Ideate BIMlink a while back. So just kind of a check here to see, have you done sort of these, what we're calling sort of non-conventional or unconventional data categories?
Okay, we have the poll open, Richard, and
Yep.
I'll give it a few more seconds for everybody to weigh in. I know that project info is actually one that we've had more requests for recently, as more and more people are trying to do sort of health check type reviews of data within BIMlink, and we're going to be adding some additional data to project info for that very reason in an upcoming version of BIMlink. So, all right, let's go ahead and close out the poll here and share the results. And it looks like we have a lot of people, which is great, looking at the view template data. And that's also kind of a newer thing, right, Richard?
Yeah, it is. I'd say, I'm trying to remember when we added that. It was maybe a year ago.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, that's great to see the view templates, there's two things about view templates, right? Meaning that there's applying a view template to a view, which we can absolutely do with BIMlink, and a lot of people do that. But there's also the sort of the actual settings of the view template itself, right? That you can manipulate within Ideate BIMlink. So there's really two sort of workflows, if you want to call it that BIMlink can support. So excellent. So, all right, thank you for that, the feedback there. Well, now I'd like to introduce Neil Rooney, who's the Senior Medical Facility Design Specialist at Electa. And I think we're so happy to have Neil. And Neil is actually as his own admission, a fairly new user to Revit. So I think it's so nice that we have sort of a different perspective here of someone who's fairly new to Revit, who's also using our Ideate software solutions. So Neil, I'd like to have you take it away.
Thanks, Richard. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Neil from Electa, as Richard kindly introduced, Senior Medical Facility Designer. We are responsible for radiation medicine, so we provide treatment machines, and you might think, how does this link with Revit? Part of the job role is to design bunkers for this equipment to live into. And as part of that, we have to produce drawings for customers, as well as site planning guides. And the requirement of this is to provide translated documents around the globe, whether it's China, Mexico, Spain, anywhere that requires it. So part of our Revit journey, we came across the software, bought it, and we were trying to use it, and we reached out to Glynis and the team to help us understand how we could implement this within Electa and we've been able to get a solution which allows us to take all of our site planning information out of our template file and translate it and then push it back into the software without actually affecting the layout of the translation file, which we want to keep global for every one of our regions that use it. So I think Glynis has got a few examples of how we went, well, the stuff we tried to change when we were working through the initial outlay.
Wonderful. Yeah, let me, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and thanks, Neil, for the overview on that. I'll go ahead and make myself presenter here. The work that Neil was trying to take on was interesting to us for a couple different reasons. One, it's just an interesting challenge. We have had many customers use Ideate BIMlink to help translate projects, but it's been a while since we had sort of been actively sort of trying to make sure it got all done. And then secondarily, we were also in the middle of a translation project ourselves. So it was something I was looking at on a daily basis. We're working on translating all of our solutions into Japanese, Chinese, French, Spanish, and German right now. I'm working with the translation company. So I was really thought it was a great thing to kind of review and make sure we were doing as good of a job as we could with our solutions. So I think where we sort of entered into this was, and Neil, please correct me if I'm misstating it. My memory's probably a little fuzzy, but I think the initial entry point into this was with BIMlink and looking at text. And so, you know, if I'm trying to do that, I think, you know, one of the things I would do is look by category for text, you know, select text here, and then you can see all these different sort of out of the box examples. Oh, and I should mention, I'm doing something I should not be doing. I am showing beta software. So there's a couple things that might look a little bit different for those of you who are really familiar. But anyway, all this content here is something that would be a great starting point. And as you pick on each one of them, there's sort of a discussion here on the right, or a description, I should say, that talks about, you know, why that group of data is useful for that task. And so I think on some level, actually, I don't know, Neil, do you remember, did you start this way when you were looking at text, or did you just build your own?
No, we started this way. We actually used the video on your website. I think it uses the spell check.
Okay. So yeah, maybe using the spell check as an example. And if you read here, there is this important note, and this is actually kind of how I think Neil kind of came to us, because he was actually running into this challenge. So I'll just explain it to you. So I think he's starting kind of here and saying, yeah, this is how I want to look at all the text in the project. And what this is, you know, this is a list of all the text. You can see these are the properties. We're showing you, you know, what view the text is in. If you need other view properties or sheet properties, you can list those as well. We're telling you what the text is, which is the part that you can edit. And then we're also including this important checkbox over here, is formatted. And you can see over here that if is formatted is false is equal to false, then it's included. So we're only looking at the things that are not formatted, sort of a double negative, if you will. And that was actually part of the original challenge, is that Neil was discovering that certain things weren't being translated, and also certain things were having trouble being modified as they were coming back into BIMlink. And it had in part to do with this. And this is just a limitation that we have in the API, which is that I'm going to go ahead and remove that filter. So we're going to get more results. And you can see, you know, some of these things are formatted and some of them aren't. The formatting has to do with how Revit uses text. And it's a newer feature, as many of you probably know. When you're making text, you can add within Revit, you can add specific like bolding within a sentence. So if the sentence is, you know, 10 words long, you can bold one of the words within that, or you can use bullets, or you can use the numbering that is like Revit formatting. So that's what it means. challenge with ThinLink is those kinds of text, we don't have the ability to know which piece in that text is actually bolded or not bolded, so we can't maintain that formatting. So leaving the filter on means you're going to be safe, you're not going to be losing formatting. And so, Neil, we talked about that risk, and it was basically because of the massive sort of challenge of the translation. I think we agreed that was a risk that was worth taking, right? Yeah. So the first step is we just sort of removed that filter, and that helped kind of get past some of the translation. The third thing I thought was really great about his process is, and we're kind of doing the same thing, is that when you're trying to make sure that you have everything sort of accommodated, one simple thing to do is just change everything to something really obnoxious and then look at it, right? So I think in this case, Neil, you were just using a lot of dollar signs to alter the text. And so this is just, what did you call this process? You had a name.
Yeah, we were using a pseudo translation, which looks at the strings of the sentences as well to see how well it would translate on the drawn sheets.
Yep. So I thought that was really great. And we're again, when we're translating our software, we're doing the same thing. It just helps us sort of understand how comprehensive it is. And when we got to a sheet like this, we realized, yeah, we've got a lot of text, but there's a lot of things that aren't being translated. The word control room here, this whole schedule on the right-hand side, and even this dimension string here has a word in it. So then we realized, well, we really need to think more broadly about what is text in a Revit project, and how can we find all of it so that it can be changed. So with some back and forth between Neil and our tech support team, and I think we were able to get a lot of these things that are shown here in English still accommodated. So I'll just walk you through some of those other links that we made. So what we started is we did make this. We started with the spell check one, and I think initially also you had ones for like each language, right? So you had maybe.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, there were different links, and then as we talked about it, we realized, well, we don't really need to do that. We can have a single definition here and just export it to different Excel files. So we would export the text to one called Spanish, or we'd export text to one called Japanese, for example. So we did make some modifications. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this one, and then we just renamed it translations. And so this was what we sort of streamlined it. It's really the same, very similar to that spell check one, just minus the filter as we see here. So that was the text, but then we realized, again, that the dimensions needed to be covered, and there actually is, out of the box, if you look at dimensions, again, you can see the sample links that we provide. And I thought this one in particular would be a great one for Neil to use because it's focused on the overrides, and that's where you're really allowed to have text. So in that particular link, if you look at it, this was designed to help people do quality control, because a lot of times people don't want those overrides. And so we have a value, if the value override of the dimension, if it has a value set, then display it. So this is a short list. It's great, right? There's only 25 things in this whole project that have that kind of override. So for those of you who aren't doing translations, this is still really good to know, because this is a great way for you to be like, oh, wait a minute, somebody, and this is, I'm sure your projects don't have this, but somebody can actually go in and write, it's 200 millimeters, right? And if they put that little dot in there, it's going to display, someone's probably not going to notice there's a little dot in there, and it's going to say I'm 200 millimeters, even though it might actually be 250. So someone would be faking that information. That's the original purpose of this particular one. But what Neil's looking for, some of these words here need to be translated. So we needed to include that information. We also saw, there were room names on the plan, so we needed to include rooms. We needed to also include the level names themselves, right? And that's going to present an interesting challenge when you do that. Everybody knows when you change a level name, you'll be prompted to also change the corresponding, or you can be prompted to change the corresponding views. We're not going to do that, of course, for the translation, but that is text that shows up in the project, so you might need to translate that as well. For a lot of the schedules, and I'll just show you the PDF again here. I don't know, Neil, what kind of schedule is this one? Do you happen to remember what this one is? Is this like an equipment schedule? I can't
It's
tell.
just an equipment schedule for the layout that you can see, yes.
Okay. Oh, right, over here. And so, probably the type, I don't know exactly what these are, but these probably don't need to be translated, but the name of the equipment is something that you'd want to display in another language. So that, in that case, we were really able to take another sort of out of the box link definition, which is designed kind of for a very similar purpose. This particular link, for those of you who are not familiar, when you go to browse, there's a whole area dedicated to sort of standards, and this is one of those. And these are our multi-category links where you can change a whole bunch of stuff all at once. And this one's really focused on just rename the family, rename the type. Well, a lot of our customers are doing that for different reasons. They're doing it because they want to have a very consistent naming standard, right? It's my company name standard, or it's my customer name. We're working for Walt Disney and we need to change it to, say, Walt Disney or something. So in this case, this out of the box link is providing Neil with the ability to change just all of the families at once for any of the categories that are listed here. So actually, Neil, I don't know that we took the time to kind of reduce this list. Obviously, you probably don't have adaptive points, I don't think, in your project. So we could have cleaned this up and made it simpler, but we did just start with this sort of out of the box one. And if you wanted to, you could say, I'm going to uncheck all, and maybe you knew that you really only were looking at specialty equipment. Let me do that. And so you could be more specific about what it is you're trying to modify if you'd like to as well. So that's sort of an overview of, I think, all of these. Is obviously sheets and view names. Those also are things that can show up. And Neil, maybe you could highlight for us sort of things. I know we're close to getting it all, but do you have any sort of outstanding things that you're still sort of trying to identify as text that you need to change?
No, we managed to achieve everything that we set out to do. One of the last things that we were talking about was the text in the top right corner of the title block, as you showed it on screen.
Yeah, right.
This is common text that appears on all of our title blocks, and it's to do with radiation protection, and we want to ensure that the customer's aware that they're responsible for providing this. So it was put on the sheet as just text, but for the purposes of translation, we had to change it to a shared parameter to be able to export it out of the template, change it, and then obviously push the correct translation back in. So that was the last thing that we did to achieve obviously what we set out to do.
So it was, I think it was this, you were in the title block family, you actually changed it from text to a parameter value. So you've got these new values in here, so that lets you change it kind of globally for each project.
That's
which is pretty cool. And we went around a little bit because I sort of forgot the best way to do this. I think what we ended up doing was defining that as a project info level parameter, right, within the project. So that
yes, so it affected
globally, right?
Yes, it affected every sheet, because I think I can't remember what the other one was off the top of my head, but the other option only affected that particular sheet, and it didn't sweep through the whole project, which didn't work for us.
Exactly. So it was making that parameter as it comes into the project, defining it within the project as belonging to project info versus the other option was we could have made it a sheet-based parameter, but as Neil's saying, then it would have varied per sheet, which in some cases might have been appropriate, but not, not for this particular use case. So that was actually one of the last sort of collections of data that we had to add, is we did actually add the project, and not listing it here. So we'll do that. So and probably this project doesn't have it set up, but we'll look for it. So I'm going to come here. So it's the project info. We can start here. Again, this is sort of the out of the box example. This is actually a new link that I'm showing you that doesn't exist on your own machines. It will be available in the future, but we've always reported on project info. There's only ever one instance of project info, but the custom parameters then here are the ones that Neil defined. So he would just start with that out of the box link, look for his own custom parameters, and then add them to the end, where you'd be able then to export that out and make the change to the language. So
yeah, and I think it's worth also mentioning because we are new to this, we've gone from a very heavy AutoCAD based background to try and excel in this at a rapid pace. We also discovered anything within a group that had been developed, we couldn't translate. So what we had to do is take a snapshot of this template, go and ungroup everything, and then we've had to record this, that we've used this particular template as the base point for translation, and just make some like a process form of sort of initial steps to take before we run the BIMlink software.
Yeah, thank you for remembering that. I forgot at the beginning when we were troubleshooting, like, why isn't all the text being updated? That was definitely one of the things that we sort of identified, right? And I think a lot of people on this call do appreciate all of the challenges with groups. I think it's sort of a running challenge and frustration to a lot of people that groups have those kinds of limitations. So in BIMlink and in Revit, if something's in a group, it is increasingly difficult to change it, and text cannot vary per group. So there's a couple ways around that. One is, as Neil's alluding to, you can ungroup it if that's an option. I don't know if like this, well, I don't know if we have an example that we can think of where that might have been visible. But the other thing, like, let's just say, these two things were in a group as an example. If they were both in a group, you would not be allowed to change the text. And that's just a limitation. If you were interested in filtering out the items that are in groups, I did want to add that is something that you can do in BIMlink. And this is valid not just for text, but for anything. And we've had a lot of people sort of need this functionality. So I'll just add that, actually not for text, but for anything else. Let me just go, what else would be in a group that's here? Actually, none of these things. A room could be in a group. All right, a room could be in a group. We do have, for model-based elements, we do have the ability to identify the group-based properties. So if you're trying to filter a list of rooms, let's say in this example, and exclude anything that's in a group, you could add the group name. Actually, just do name is the best way. Or actually group. So let me just, that's not gonna be helpful. Yeah, I think it's name, yeah. Oh, it actually is already here. Look at that. I've already done it, Glennis. I'm like, why am I not saying the name? It's already there for this reason, sorry. So yeah, so we're showing the group name. So these are not going to be able to change, and that's why they're gray here, because they belong to a group. So here we're just saying, is this in a group or at all? What is the name of the group? And then if you wanted to go one step further, you could add that as an additional filter and say, the group name is empty or does not have a value set, as an example. You could add those filters to make that a little bit more challenging.
Well, and this even ties back to what Paul was showing when his auditing, because in Ideate Explorer, we can also filter those elements out as well. So when Paul showed that he could switch the work set, sometimes
Exactly.
the work set, as an example, might be grayed out. Like you select 5,000 things and it's like, why is it grayed out? Well, because some of those elements are part of a group that then the work set can't be changed. So you could then use Ideate Query to filter out those pieces or those elements that are part of the group and then change everything but them.
Right. Thank you so much, Neil. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I know we have one question that I want to make sure we address that's not totally related to this, but do you have anything else you want to mention before we segue?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing this experience. I know it was a big learning curve for both of us, really, to kind of go through and find all these things. So hopefully that was helpful, and I think hopefully other people can benefit, whether you're doing translation or not. I think this is useful information for everybody in the call.
Yes, thank you. And I know, Glennis, you were did you want to show something about the project browser? I was going to keep you. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just do it real quick because Pedro had a great question and I wanted to, and you can certainly, again, anybody can unmute. But Pedro, thank you for your question. It sounds like what you're interested in is managing the project browser structure with BIMlink. And the answer is yes, but there's no sort of out of the box way to do that. So I'll just use this real quick as an example. You can see actually in Neil's project, he's got views and then discipline as his primary way. So I guess really the first thing is you need to understand, before you can begin, you would actually need to understand what the rules were, right? So here it's discipline and family type drive this particular project browser organization for the views, right? So what you can do in BIMlink, once you know what is driving that, then you can just take the views or the sheets and set up a link that would help you with that. So for example, you could go to this views one and just make sure that you have those properties. So I need discipline, for example, right? So I would add discipline here. And then, you'll be able, where it's appropriate, it doesn't apply to everything, but where it's appropriate, you'll be able to switch that. And then, I don't know if it was family and type or what it was, sorry, but whatever that other property is. And in your cases, in a lot of cases for the project browser, it's going to be a custom property as well. So you would just add those and then you'd be able to modify them. So it's sort of an ad hoc way, but hopefully that helps. Thanks, Pedro.
Yeah, that's great, Glennis. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. I know we're at the top of the hour. That was your alarm going off, right?
It was, yeah.
All right. Let me switch back here. And okay, excellent. And real quickly, I just also wanted to show that, since we were talking about translations, we do have a blog that was written by one of our consultants in Australia that talked about text translation. I don't think it was near as comprehensive as what Neil has gone through, but they were translating information for the project. So that's something you might want to look at too, is that on our blog. So hopefully everyone will subscribe to our blog and find that information useful. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to mention that you can always reach out to anyone on the Ideate Software team via email for additional questions. There is, in all the products, there's the check for updates, which allows you to make sure that you have the latest and greatest software. But there's also something you may not be familiar with, is there is a request feature or report bug. So, we get these. This goes to our Ideate Software support email. And so that gets into our support queue. If you have something that maybe a new feature or new workflow that you'd like, be sure to use that. And again, right from any one of our products. And by the way, speaking of the report feature or workflow, I'll shamelessly plug or ask if anyone would like to do a particular blog article, or they have a workflow they'd like to document, just shoot us an email, and we'll be happy to take that information, like I did with this blog on translation text. I actually asked this consultant, his name is Shannock. I said, hey, can you just give me some screenshots, show me a little bit about what you did, and then we wrote up a nice little technical article on it. So if you've got a workflow that you think would be relevant for other people to be able to use, and you'd like to share that, we would love to hear from you. We have, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing these online user groups probably about once a quarter. So we're scheduling 4 per year. And so the next one coming up for the EMEA time zone is going to be on May 5th, or actually, no, I'm sorry. These are the two upcoming presentations, but we also have in May the online user group. So we're doing more because we can't be in person with people. We're doing more online events. And I also just wanted to quickly mention my last in-person event was at HOK in Dallas a year ago in March. So Paul, I wasn't able to get over to London at that time, but I did get to Dallas to the HOK office. And that was the last one that I flew back to Boston, and everything shut down right after that. So that's my connection to HOK here. So again, I know we're a couple minutes over. If there are any questions, please feel free to type those in. We'll hang out here for a few minutes, but we really appreciate your time and attention. So with that, do you have any other closing statements, Glennis?
I don't have any. I'm not seeing any questions here. Just thanks again so much to both Paul and to Neil for volunteering your time and sharing your expertise. That's really, when we ask people what they want to do at these user groups, it's definitely, hearing from you about your experiences. So thank you.
That's right. In fact, you'll find in this survey, there's a question about that, whether you'd be willing to present at a future Revit or Ideate Software user group. So be sure to think about that very hard as you fill out that questionnaire. Thank you. So, like I said, I really appreciate it. I think we're going to close the presentation, and I hope everyone has a great day.